Okay, we'll call the special meeting of Brooklyn City Council to order. Mary Jo, will you call the roll, please?
Sue Grodick. Here. Kathy Pucci.
Here.
Stephen Coyle.
Here.
Andy Selhertz.
Here.
Matt Mosley.
Here.
Aaron Borowski.
Here.
Kevin Tansky.
Okay, will everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with everyone's indulgence, we're going to have our law director speak first. He had a previous commitment so he's very limited in the amount of time that he can spend with us. So right after he gives an overview of where we are now and what our options are, then we will have the public session. Mr. Butler. Thank you.
I figured I would be most helpful if I just explained what our options are with respect to rate.
Is it on? It's up.
Better?
I
Better
think
with
so.
Speakers? Okay, very good. No? Okay, great. I figured it'd be best, I'd be best used by explaining what our options are with respect to the regulation of adult use marijuana uses in the city. I use uses as a term of art for land use and zoning rather than a person's physical use of marijuana. Chapter 3780 of the Ohio Revised Code is the chapter that was adopted by the voters in last November's election and went into effect shortly afterward. It's a fairly comprehensive chapter when it comes to adult use, or what's known as recreational marijuana. Not only does that chapter provide for the legality of persons' possession and use of recreational marijuana, but it also authorizes municipalities to do certain things. It also limits municipalities from doing certain things in this particular space. Municipalities, for example, are not permitted to prohibit by ordinance that which the chapter 3780 explicitly permits. So, for example, we could not enact legislation that bans adults' use of marijuana, recreational marijuana, if that use is specifically permitted by that particular chapter. We could not ban adults' home grow marijuana operations so long as those operations comply with Chapter 3780, and that is to say, you can have only a certain number of plants growing in your yard, and you can't transact business using, I'm speaking sort of generally here, you can't transact business with respect to your home grow operations. But we can take up some space with respect to the regulation of the uses of land in our city, commercial uses of land in particular. There are different kinds of adult use marijuana operations. There are cultivators, growers, processors, those who turn raw product into products that people would purchase. There's testing facilities that make sure that those products are safe. And there are, of course, retail operations called dispensaries. The word dispensary is a term of art that's been used in the Revised Code before. That's when medical marijuana was enacted several years ago. And that term dispensary really just stands for the retail outlet for the sale of adult use marijuana under Chapter 3780. If Brooklyn were a city that had already established medical marijuana dispensaries in it, or other operations in it, we would be a little more limited in terms of our ability to regulate the land use for commercial marijuana operations under the adult use chapter. But we don't have medical marijuana facilities in our city. We banned medical marijuana facilities back when that legislation was enacted at the state level, and we were permitted to ban that. So that's a ban in our zoning code right now. That gives us a little more leeway in terms of what we want to do with adult use or recreational marijuana facilities. I suspect what we are most concerned about in this room tonight is hearing from the public with respect to their comfort level for retail dispensaries. That's what most consumers, of course, would touch in this industry most frequently. And so you should just know that the chapter allows us to continue to ban adult use marijuana dispensaries going forward. We would be authorized to enact that kind of ban in our zoning code. We don't have that ban in place now. What we have is just a moratorium that lasts through, I think, the end of June, and it's subject to extension or cancellation by you. But we are permitted to enact legislation that would effectuate a ban. We're permitted to extend the moratorium to determine whether or not the state legislature is going to continue to act in this realm. We would say that's unlikely this year. We've heard from others on that point before, just with their off-the-cuff remarks. And we see that kind of paralysis in the State House right now in the legislature. They're not passing a lot of laws. This is a pretty quiet legislature in terms of the number of laws being passed. We don't anticipate that there's going to be a lot of movement in this area from the state going forward. So I would say that we shouldn't hold our breaths for the state to act if that's what we're going to do, if we're going to continue to extend the moratorium. And then finally, we could enact our own legislation that permits recreational marijuana uses in the city, and medical as well, if that's our intention, but regulates them. So we could, for example, permit them in certain zoned districts. We could do that with particular guardrails in place, hours of operation, for example, parking requirements, fencing requirements, other security measures that perhaps the state hasn't already put in place, things that might be more to our liking at a local level. You are most able to do that under this chapter of the revised code. You've got that kind of flexibility. So it's do nothing, wait for the state to act, probably face a number of interested parties seeking to pull permits for retail uses at some point in the future if we do nothing. That would challenge our existing, they would probably pull permits under the general retail districts in our zoning code right now. And then we'd have to scramble to see whether or not those uses would be authorized. Continue the moratorium, which would ban the use temporarily. Put a ban in place, which would outright ban the use going forward, and that would be codified, or regulate and permit the use of adult use facilities going forward in certain zone districts. I'm certainly at your service when it comes to whatever you ultimately decide. We can create legislation that does any of those things, and we can do that relatively quickly. The zoning code does require, when you change the zoning code, which is where this regulation would be housed, or any of these bans would be housed, does require some process. We've got to have a number of readings. We've got to have a public hearing. You just went through a zoning code change. You're aware of that. But that does require a little bit of time. Other than that, we can move fairly quickly. The industry, incidentally, is catching up now. And the state is catching up with the law that was enacted by the voters. On June 7, I believe, right thereabouts, is when the first licenses will be issued for adult uses, facilities around the state. And that's under the new Division of Cannabis Control established at the state level. They've gone through their rulemaking process now, or at least partially. There's more to come. And so the industry is now wondering, where am I going to go around the state? Lots of municipalities are enacting bans, some are regulating, and some are doing nothing at this point, and allowing their own zoning codes, existing zoning codes, to regulate uses as they would any other retail business.
Thank you. Before Mr. Butler has to leave, does anyone on council have any questions for Mr. Butler before he has to leave? Okay, thank you very much. We will now have our public session. If anyone has anything to say relating to our topic of this meeting, which is the adult use cannabis dispensary within the city, please step up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will be recognized, and please observe the 5-minute time limit.
Cindy Whitty, 4164 Springcrest Drive. I would first like to thank council and the mayor for holding this special meeting and discussion regarding dispensaries in the city of Brooklyn. While I personally do not use marijuana, either medically or recreationally, I do support the idea of allowing at least one dispensary in the city of Brooklyn if it is done carefully and correctly. I attended the last work session council held several weeks ago, and this topic was also discussed. It was interesting to learn by facts presented by Councilmember Aaron Borowski. The results from the last election showed that in the city of Brooklyn alone, our 6 precincts, out of the 6 precincts in Brooklyn, two precincts supported the issue of marijuana use by 50%. Another 2 precincts passed by 60%, and the remaining 2 precincts passed by 70%. These are possibly the same residents that have also elected you all to council. Other comments made by Councilmember Sue Grodick was that it may be too soon to consider a dispensary and that the tax revenue generated from the sales of marijuana may not be as great as one might think over time, such as in the sin tax that was implemented on the purchase of cigarettes years back. The monies received from that sin tax were supposed to help fund programs like the arts, and over the years, these funds have diminished, and it is really not helping as much as anticipated. She also stated that she did not want to see a dispensary in Brooklyn at all, and that the city has worked hard over the last several years and did not like the image having a dispensary would create for the city of Brooklyn. While I do believe the revenue from the sin tax has decreased, I feel that it should be taken into consideration that a lot of smokers have since stopped buying cigarettes because of how expensive it has become, and therefore are now vaping, thus taking away from the sin tax revenue generated from cigarettes. I do understand that the whole vaping topic is just as bad, if not worse, but that's another discussion. As far as setting the tone for what type of image a dispensary would create for Brooklyn, I would ask the members of council who agree with that statement to please elaborate on exactly what they mean by that. Are you stereotyping or labeling those who use marijuana as people with less than favorable image? I certainly would hope not, as you may all be surprised to know just how many of our friends, neighbors, and upstanding citizens in the city of Brooklyn use marijuana, whether it be recreationally or medically. Some who have in recent past have been appointed to serve on commissions and committees. Additionally, I have a family member who uses marijuana for recreational purposes. He has a master's degree in economics, a successful career earning over 6 figures a year, and even sat on the panel for healthcare reform in Washington, D.C. many years ago. I don't think that's a bad image at all. With regard to the overall image of Brooklyn, I would say yes, the city has spent quite a bit of time and money on cosmetics, such as pretty signs and banners and flowers, and has also added police and fire safety forces. However, as the saying goes, beauty is only skin deep. We still have Walmart and Ridge Park Square, which are part of our image, and there are a lot of folks who don't believe they present a very good one. Other interesting comments and information that was presented during the last work session by our police chief, Milky, was that he actually spoke to the mayor and police chief of Bedford Heights about the dispensary that was opened there around a year ago. Chief Milky, when asked about issues, problems, and concerns with the dispensary, stated that they have really not had many. They seem to be doing just fine, and they didn't have many complaints. In the first year that that dispensary in Bedford Heights was opened, they generated approximately $700,000 in revenue.
You have 30 seconds.
In closing, I feel that if Brooklyn is going to continue to move forward, we should be forward-thinking. I have said it before, and I'll say it again. We cannot just talk the talk, we must walk the walk. A dispensary, again, if done with careful consideration, could create an image of, hey, Brooklyn is pretty open-minded. They really are moving forward, not to mention the additional revenue it would create and put back into the city. Thank you.
Hi, name's Donna Mallory, 4251 Brookway Lane. I moved here like 4 years ago. I have 4 grandkids. I do not want this in the city. Sorry. I do not want it in the city. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, on Facebook, it was a 8th grader walked out of school today and got killed. Who knows what was in the neighborhood, what was going on? And I'm not saying it was drugs, but Brooklyn's beautiful. I can care less about the revenue for selling pot. Let's just put it simple, you know? I'm totally against it, you know? And everybody's got choices. It's like vaccines, you know, and, you know, on and on. But I don't want it in the city. Thanks.
Hi, Greg Carson, 8600 Ansonia Avenue. I'd like to know how many of you here have actually, I'm a medical marijuana user, I have my card. How many of you have actually been in a dispensary? Okay, so you know, it's a man trap to get into there. You have to show your card. I don't know how recreational it's gonna be, but it's a man trap, you have to show your card. Because of the federal anti-money laundering laws, they are generally a cash business. So they have their own tight security because they don't want to be robbed. I've been in them in Lakewood, in Cleveland. I even drive out to the one in Lorraine. You know, get the cream for my knees really helps a lot. Now, if you're worried about your kids, someone under 18 or 20, I think it's 21, cannot get into a place like this because they card. It's probably easier for these kids to get cigarettes than it would be to get marijuana. It's what you're looking at here. We should have got in on the ground floor with the medical marijuana. We should have started right away, started pulling in the revenues. Garfield Heights charges an additional 10% tax on the sales just for them. So it's not like the sin tax where it sort of goes in the general fund and who knows what happens to it. But Garfield Heights was charging their own tax for this stuff and making money. It's what you're looking at here. It's like the old blue laws back in the day where you couldn't sell beer on Sundays. Now everybody's selling beers on Sunday and wine. Has the country gone to hell? No, not really. Is it going to stop somebody from going? Right down in the flats, you got the landing. And on Madison at 117th, you got Rise. On Madison, or Detroit in Lakewood, you've got another Rise. You've got Terrasano in Garfield Heights. It's not like it's going to stop anything. It's just that we're losing out by not having this here. The buildings are always clean. They're well maintained. They're cleaner than most beverage, they are cleaner than beverage stores I've been in. So I'm all for it. I think it could be a good source of revenue, and it's not going to stop anything. This train is rolling. We either get on it or we pretend with our blue laws. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elton Lytle, 4247 Brookway. Thank you, City Council, for the time. For the record, I am a medical marijuana patient. I am registered with the state. That comes with guidelines regarding how one is supposed to behave, purchase, act in purchase and transportation. Also with regards to one's Second Amendment rights. And it's my understanding that with the state law for recreational cannabis, it is to act on that as if it's being regulated like alcohol. So if we are comfortable with the way alcohol is regulated in our municipality, in the storefronts, then I think we can be comfortable with the process of regulating cannabis such as alcohol. The laws do allow municipalities to be a little bit more firm and tighter on that. You do have that leeway. I do have neighbors and fellow residents here that have various opinions on the subject, and I have very much respect for those opinions. I do make it a point to not showcase my medical dispensary, except now in the public. I make it a point not to, show off or do anything for, in any regards to cause any type of distraction, public nuisance, or to influence any minors or anybody who might be susceptible to it if it's not their thing. So from a pure libertarian, capitalist, pro-government regulation, I would support this endeavor with your blessing. And I think we can trust but verify that if done smartly, this could be a benefit for the community at large. My previous colleagues have mentioned, as far as tax revenue goes, and if we're concerned about the county sin tax and the funding for the arts, if people are not smoking or drinking as much, if we're going to do a vice tax, this would be one that would get a lot of revenue and help maybe replace some of that lost revenue if done smartly. But everybody else has brought up, again, very good points of my fellow colleagues, so I won't waste any more of your time, but thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to be recognized? Last call. Okay. Does anyone on council have any questions, comments? Okay. We'll need a motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned. Second.
And thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
To adjourn, Sue Grodick. Yes. Kathy Pucci.
Yes.
Stephen Coyle.
Yes.
Andy Selhertz.
Yes.
Matt Mosley.
Yes.
Aaron Borowski.
Yes.
Kevin Tansky.
Yes. You